Entelechy, verse 1. Chapter 13, Thistle. You have to stand there, said Rook, for the 4th time, and not come past the white stone. That's the rule. Everyone knows the rule. Which white stone? Said Codex. That one. Obviously that one. There were, by Vane's count, 11 white stones visible from where they stood at the top of the long meadow. He did not raise it. The meadow went away below them for 2 kilometers. A great open sweep of horsetail and low fern cropped down to the height of Codex's shoulder, and standing out in it, spread wide, were the horned ones, 41 of them. Codex counted twice and then began, quietly, on the subclassification, and got nowhere because everything in his archive on the subject had been written by people looking at bones. They were the size of the bot's entire landing zone. 4 square, deep through the chest, with a bony frill standing up behind the skull like a shield propped on end, and 2 brow horns on the adults that came forward and up 1.5 meters. They were not grey. Nothing in 409,000 illustrations had prepared him for the fact that they were not grey. They were slate dark along the back, going to a dusty rust across the flanks, and every frill in the herd was different. Barred, blotched, one of them nearly white, and several of the big ones had frills that were plainly scarred, punched through in places, and healed. They fight each other, said Vane. They fight everything, said Rook. Don't stand near the... A juvenile came up out of the fern 100 meters away, at a trot, and then at more than a trot. She was Rook's age, which in a ceratopsian meant something different. 2.5 tons, shoulder high to a tyrannosaur, with her frill still soft-edged and her brow horns only half their eventual length, and she came straight up the slope at the 4 of them without deviation and without slowing. Codex began to say something about threat display. Do not move, said Vane. She came to 11 meters, to 8. Codex's ranging suite began producing time-to-contact figures with a frequency that suggested it would have liked somebody to do something about them. At 4 meters, she was still not slowing, and the ground was going through the sand under their feet in short, hard shocks. And then at 2, she stopped. Not a skid, a stop. The whole 2.5 tons of her arriving at rest between one stride and the next, with her head down and her frill up and the tip of her left brow horn approximately 40 centimeters from Codex's forward lens. Nothing had moved. Ingot, because he had not thought to. Vane, because he had decided not to. Codex, because his legs had, in a manner he never afterwards fully explained, declined. The Triceratops stood there, breathing at them for a while. Then she turned her head and put one eye on them properly and said, "Ha, ha." That is hello, said Rook, in a rush. That's just how she... Thistle. This is Codex and Ingot and Vane. They came out of the air, by our cave, and they can't be eaten. I tried, and they know things. They know the names of things nobody's ever. They didn't move, said Thistle. No, said Rook. Nothing doesn't move. She came round them at a walk, close, 1 step at a time, and the 3 of them turned with her, which she noted. Everything moves. You run at a browser, it goes. You run at a hunter, it turns and squares up and tells you where its teeth are. You run at one of the little scavengers and it goes up a tree and shouts. That's all of them. That is the whole list. That's everything I've ever run at, and every single one does one of those 3 things. You have run at a great many things, said Ingot. How else would I know what they are? Said Thistle. Vane said, quietly to Codex, note that. Noted. No, note it properly. She has just described a controlled experiment. She did not charge us. She applied a stimulus with a known set of responses in order to classify an unknown. I can hear you, said Thistle. She had come round to the front again, and she put her head down until the frill filled most of the sky above them, and she breathed in hard twice, with the deliberateness of an animal doing a job. Then she backed up 2 paces, and something in her posture changed. And for the first time she looked at Rook rather than at the bots. They've got no smell, she said. I know, said Rook, delighted. Isn't it? Number. Listen. And now there was something in her voice that had not been there before, and Vane's threat assessment, which had been declining steadily for a minute, stopped declining. Everything has a smell. You've got a smell. You smell like meat in the cave and your mother. The old fern-eater smells like the fern. The plated one smells like the wood. The water one smells like the water and rotten fish. I have never in my life met a thing that didn't smell of anything at all. And that's not a nothing. That's not like being quiet. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you actually see it? Oh. No, said Rook. Smell is how you know what something wants, said Thistle. There was a silence in the top of the long meadow. I know the fern-eater's not going to hurt me because she smells like ferns, Thistle said. I know your father's had a kill from 400 paces off, and I know he's had it 2 days ago and not this morning, and that tells me exactly how much I have to care about where he's standing. I know when a thing's frightened. I know when it's sick. I know when it's carrying young. I know when it hasn't eaten. I know all of that before it ever opens its mouth, and I have never once had to trust anybody's word for any of it in my whole life. She looked at the 3 of them with real dislike. You could be standing there wanting anything at all, and I'd have no way to know until it happened. We do not want anything, said Codex. See, that's exactly it, said Thistle. That's the answer a thing gives when it wants something. Away down the meadow, one of the big ones had lifted her head and was looking up the slope, unmoving, in the specific way that means a young animal has gone further than it was told to. That's my mother, said Thistle, without turning round. She'll want to know what you are. She'll want it properly, with everybody sitting down, and terms, and it'll take a season, because that's how she does everything. A pause. Don't come onto the meadow until she says. Not because of her. Because of them. A jerk of the frill at the herd. At 41 animals, several of which were now also looking. Half of them are carving. You want to walk out there with no smell and see what happens. That's your business. But he's not coming with you. Another pause. Shorter. Rook. You know, he's not coming with you. Some. I know, said Rook. Right, said Thistle. She turned to go, and got 4 paces, and stopped, and looked back at the bots one final time with an expression that Codex spent a great deal of the following winter trying to characterize, and which Ingot named correctly on the first attempt as disappointment. It'd be easier if you were just animals, she said. Then she went down the slope at a walk, and after about 200 meters, for no reason at all that any of them could see, at a run. They stood at the top of the meadow a while. Well, said Codex. That was a disaster. That, said Vane, was the most useful 90 seconds since we arrived. And I want you to go away and think about why. Because she is intelligent. Because she is right, said Vane. Everything in this valley reads intention off the body. Smell, posture, sound, the state of the gut. It is a complete system, and it has worked for 100 million years, and we are the only objects in it that the system returns nothing for. We are unreadable. He started down the slope. She has just told us, on the third day, exactly how we will be judged here for as long as we stay. Not by what we do, by whether anybody can predict what we will do next. Behind them, Rook was still watching the meadow. She talked to me for ages, he said. To nobody in particular. That's the longest anyone's talked to me since the wet. Enter Lecky, Verse 1, Chapter 14, Moss. He's up at the top bend, said Rook. He's always up at the top bend in the morning? Just don't be in a hurry. Oh. We are not in a hurry, said Codex. You're always in a hurry, said Rook. You talk like the flies. They found him where the river came round under the gorge and spread into a shallow reach full of horsetail. And the first thing that happened was that Codex misidentified him as terrain. In his defense, the light was behind, and the mist was still lying in the bend, and the shape in the middle of it did not have the outline of an animal. It had the outline of a fallen tree with a small hill behind it. Then the tree moved and went on moving, and kept on being longer than it had any business being. And at the end of it, there was a head the size of Codex's whole body, 12 meters from the shoulders it belonged to, going through the horsetail at the speed of a slow tide. Oh, said Codex, and stopped walking. The head came round on the neck, without the body moving at all. A slow horizontal sweep. And one eye, dark and wet and unhurried, arrived at them and stayed. There was a very long pause, long enough that Ingot began looking at the bank, long enough that Vane completed a full survey of the reach and started a second. You, said the Brontosaur, are new. Ball. We are, said Codex, and we. Said the Brontosaur, and went back to eating. Rook lay down in the shallows with a splash that soaked all three of them. That's moss, he said. That's it. That's the whole introduction. That's how it goes. You have to wait now. For how long? Ages, said Rook, with satisfaction. It was 19 minutes before the head came back. Out of the sky, it said. That is correct, said Codex. And then, aware that Vane was watching him, we came out of an opening in the air, near the cave at the north end. 2 days ago. We are not from this valley. Said Moss. He ate for 11 minutes. The technique was extraordinary, and Codex, who could not help himself, recorded all of it. The head went into the horsetail low, and came up the stems raking with peg teeth. Stripping, not chewing. Nothing was chewed, ever. And then the whole mass went down the neck in a slow, visible bolus. And the neck came back for more, and the body did not shift. And the whole animal moved perhaps a meter in that time by taking one step with a foreleg. Around the feet, in the churned water, small things were feeding on what he stirred up. Something was standing on his back. "Where from?" said Moss. "That is a difficult question to answer," said Codex, "and I want to give you a true answer rather than an easy one. So I am going to say that we came from very far away, and that the distance is not a distance you could walk, and that I would rather not be more precise than that today." Moss thought about that for 4 minutes. "All right," he said. And that was all. No follow-up, no probing, no offense. Codex found that he had prepared 11 further evasions and would not be using any of them, and felt, unexpectedly, worse rather than better. The morning went on. The mist lifted off the water. Rook fell asleep in the shallows and had to be woken up when he began to drift. Ingot went ashore and dug into the bank with his manipulators. Came back with clay all up one side, and announced to nobody in particular that the deposit went down at least 1.5 meters and was very fine and had almost no grit in it, which was the best news he had had since arriving. Vane took up a position on a gravel bar and watched the tree line. And at intervals, out of the horsetail, the brontosaur asked his questions. The second one came around the middle of the morning. "Who feeds you?" "Ha! Nobody," said Codex. "We do not eat." "Ooh. Everything eats." "We take a little heat and a little light." "Umea." "Not that," said Moss. He came up out of the water with a whole mat of horsetail hanging off his jaw and let it fall, and did not go back down. "Not what goes in you. Who feeds you?" "There's..." And now the sentences came slowly, but they kept coming. And Rook lifted his head, because he had never heard Moss make more than about 11 words in a row. "There's the eating, and that's mine. I do that. I'm doing it now. I'll do it till the light goes. And then there's the other thing. When my leg went in the mud at the crossing 2 wets ago, and I couldn't get it out, and I was there all night. My mother stood in the water next to me all night. She didn't do anything. She couldn't do anything. It's mud. There's nothing to do. She just stood there in it. All night. And in the morning, I got out. He looked at them. That's who feeds you. Everybody's got somebody. The horned ones have got the herd. The cliff lot have got the cliff. They shout at each other all night that they hate each other, but they've all got it. The old fern-eater has got nobody now, and you can see it on her. She's a pause. She's thin in the way that isn't about food. The 3 machines said nothing. "You're 3, said Moss. "You came out of the sky, and it's not a distance anybody could walk, so nobody's coming. So it's 3. That's a small number. That's a very small number." He put his head down again. "That's all I wanted to know." What? Codex looked at the recording afterwards 11 times. It was the first occasion on which any creature in the Cretaceous worked out the actual shape of their situation, and it had been done in a shallow reach of a river, over 4 hours, by an animal eating horsetail, on the basis of no information whatsoever except a refusal to say where they were from. The third question came at noon. "What was he for?" Moss said, and the head was pointing at Vane. "He watches," said Ingot. "For what?" "For anything that might hurt us." Said Moss. Then, after 2 minutes, "Tell him he's looking at the wrong side. The trees are fine. It's the water that's got things in it. And went back to eating, and did not elaborate. And Vane moved 40 meters and spent the next hour watching the river with an expression that Codex found extremely gratifying. The fourth question came when they were leaving. Rook had gone on ahead, splashing. The sun was straight up, and everything had gone still and heavy. And Codex, who had had 4 hours to think about it and had decided to try, turned back and said, "May I ask you something? Spevin for Velev." You are the largest living thing any of us has ever seen. You could stand in that river, and nothing in this valley could touch you. Are you afraid of anything at all? The brontosaur was quiet for a long time. Long enough for Codex to be certain the question had failed. "Small stuff," said Moss. "I beg your pardon?" "Vah!" "Small stuff," Moss said again. "When I was little, there was a thing on the flats and it was hardly anything. It'd come up to your middle. There was a lot of them. They didn't fight my mother. They just kept coming. For 2 days. And they got at her legs. And she was fine. She was fine after. But you can't." He stopped and started again in a different place, which was how he did most of his sentences. "Big things I can see. Big things come from one direction and you put yourself in front of them. That works. That always works." He put his head down level with Codex. 12 meters of neck, curving in the noon light, and the eye was very dark and very calm. It's the ones that come from everywhere. I don't know what to do about. Anyway. Then he ate, and the interview was over, and it was the only conversation of consequence they had with him that entire summer. Walking back up the valley, Ingot said, "How much of that did you record?" 41 minutes, said Codex. "Out of 5 hours." "And how much of it," said Vane, "was him answering questions? And how much was him asking them?" Zero. Codex did not answer immediately, because he was still doing the arithmetic. And when the arithmetic came out, he found he did not much enjoy it. "He asked 4, he said." "Yes." They were all correct questions. "Yes." "Zai." "He was interviewing me," said Codex, "for 4 hours. While eating. He was deciding," said Vane, "whether the valley is in trouble now that we are in it. And I would very much like to know what he concluded. And I do not think we are ever going to be told." "Very boy,"